Hey folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today we're going to be making some fuchsia flowers. We're also making their leaves, and we're making kind of a branch as well. So the majority of the paper I'm going to be using today is my Julia paper. It's very, very thin, which is going to be good for these flowers because we're sort of stacking them and making them a little bit three-dimensional, but not all the way. And I'll be going over the colors and everything that I'm using. As always, I'll always leave links to my tools and supplies in the comment section, but I'll go over everything in detail when we get to those individual parts. So I showed the colors I have for the flowers. I'm using these two greens for my leaves. And then for the branches, I have a thicker 1/8 inch light brown paper. And I'll talk about why I'm choosing that later on as well. You can use whatever quilling tool you like. I have my needle tool, some small scissors, my tweezers, Elmer's glue all in my needle nose container, and I have a cork board here just to start building some stuff if I need it, a ruler for measuring, and then I also will be using some tacky glue as well. I just did not have that in hand. So here's an example of a fuchsia flower, and there's a lot of parts to it. You have kind of the hot pink sepals at the top, you have the purple petals coming out of the middle, and then you have the stamen and pistils, the reproductive parts that make new flowers, coming out the bottom. And then, like I said, we're going to be making leaves and branches because these don't kind of just exist on their own. They need to kind of be hanging to make sense. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this entire strip of a color called purple from the Julia paper, and I'm going to roll that all the way from end to end. And I did tear off one of the ends to start with, just because that's the end I'm going to be gluing when I'm all done, and it makes a nice smooth transition once it's glued. It doesn't have kind of a bump on the end if you did not tear that end. Here we go. That's a little bit tricky to roll this all the way up because it's so thin on a tool. So that's why I took it off about halfway, and I'm just rolling it up in hand. And then I like to just open it up a tiny, tiny bit. Just get a little bit of air going through those layers, but it's still mostly a tight coil. I'm going to pinch one end into a teardrop and glue that end to set. There we go. And I'm actually going to need 3 of these for each flower. So I have all 3 together here. 2 of them I'm going to leave as is, just leave them flat. But then the other one, I'm just going to mold it very slightly, a very slight dome coming up from the center. And then to keep that shape, I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the underside and just kind of wipe that around. You can use your finger, you can use a little paintbrush if you need to, but those are going to be our petals for our flower. So let's set those aside to dry. And the next thing we're going to do is make the sepals, or the pink part that comes out above the petals. So for this, I'm using another strip of that Julia paper. Again, I don't know if I mentioned, this is 2mm paper if you're looking at specifics. And this color is called Hot Pink, and I'm tearing this strip in half. The full strip is a little more than 15 inches. So if you have a different brand, do the math, 7.5 inches or so. It's not going to matter too much how precise you are. And this one, again, I'm rolling up all the way from end to end, taking it off the tool this time and letting it open up evenly between my fingers, about that much. And then this time we're making a curved marquee. So we're going to pinch one side, we're going to pinch the other side, glue that down to set, and then the curved part comes in because we're twisting it over both hands at the same time. It's making sort of an S shape. For each flower, we're going to need 4 of those. So I made 3 so far, and here is my last one. So again, it's the other half of that strip, rolling it all the way to the end, taking it off my tool, letting it open up pretty naturally, pinch one side, pinch the other side, a little bit of glue, and then make an S between your hands. There we go. So there is my 4 sepals I'm going to be making for this flower. And then I also need the part that comes above the sepal. It's another section of this flower. It's going to be made again of that same hot pink paper. And this time though, it only needs to be about 4 inches. So I'm just going to measure that real quick. Put the rest aside for now. We'll need that again in a bit, so don't put that rest of that strip too far away. And this time we're just going to be making a simple teardrop. So that again is rolling it all the way on your tool. And let it open up. And pinch one side. I like to pinch the side where my paper ends because I find that it hides that seam a little bit nicer. And then that's about it for that piece. This is, in the real flower, this is sort of like a cone shape. We're just sort of simplifying some pieces here and there. So we just made a teardrop for that. Now with the rest of that strip, we're going to be making a double thick piece here. So that is just folding a long strip in half, putting a bit of glue from end to end. Sorry, not from end to end, from the middle to one end, I should say. And this can be a little tricky, a little messy when this real thin paper comes out, but that's not to say it's not difficult. You might just need to wipe your hands off afterwards. It's usually a good idea when you're making quilling projects to have a bit of a damp paper towel or a rag nearby. If you ever see my hands kind of going off screen for a second, it's because I have a little paper towel next to me that I just wipe my fingers on when they get a little bit gluey. Once you have your glue done, you're going to fold it back in half and run your fingers through from end to end in many different directions, and we're going to let that dry. That's going to end up being our stamen and our pistil that come out of the middle of the flower later on. And then at the bottom of those, there's these little round bits that's going to make your pollen. That's going to be made from little pieces of this beige Julia paper. All I'm doing is for that, I'm tearing off 1-inch strips. So I'm going to be making 5 for each flower. The flowers in real life have a few more, but again, sometimes you got to simplify things a little bit here and there. And for these, I'm just making some really small, tight curls, just some little pegs. So I'm rolling it up on my needle tool and leaving it on the tool, gluing down the ends, making sure everything's set. And then I'm just going to make this a little bit flatter. So I'm just going to kind of squish it. That's what you should look like for that piece. And we're going to make all of these. So we need 5 altogether. And then when they're done, you can set those aside. Now the last thing we're going to be doing with this pink paper is making a couple buds, little flower buds, because these plants tend to sort of grow in stages. So you'll see some full-grown plants, and then you'll also see some flower buds on the same plant. So you need different size strips for these, but again, we're just turning them into teardrops. I would say anywhere between like 6 and 8 inches. You can vary them to have some a little bit bigger and some a little bit smaller. But just like the teardrop we made earlier, you're going to make that. And then I'm going to take a piece that's between 2 and 3 inches long, roll that up on my tool, just making a loose coil here, gluing the end down right after it comes off the tool without shaping it at all. Sometimes when you need really tiny pieces, you can just grab a tool or a toothpick or something and kind of rub that end to make sure it sticks. So it's a really little circle. And then I'm just going to be gluing it to the top of my teardrop, but I need it to be curved. So I just folded it over part of my needle tool just to get the curve in there. And then I'm just going to attach it, like I said, to the top of that little teardrop. Get this to a place where we can see it a little bit easier. There we go. So that's pretty much it for that. And you can really press that on there if it looks like it's kind of bouncing off a little bit. But that's pretty much it. So that's going to be our little flower bud with our little connector piece. From the top of that is going to be a stem later on. But let's go ahead and grab our green. This is the lighter of the two greens. It's called apple green. And I'm making about 2-inch strips here. I have a little bit that's also a double thick strip in the same way that I made that pink one earlier. That's going to be our stem. This one though is just a single strip about 2 inches, rolling that all the way up, similar to what we just did for the connector piece for our flower bud. This is going to go on the top of our flower. We're just turning that into sort of an oval shape. So just make that coral, glue down the end, and gently pinch in the middle so that makes an oval. So I have a couple of those and then a little bit of the double thick strip for the stem. Now while you have your green out, we're going to be making some leaves. And I chose to make these two-tone leaves. You don't have to do that. You can make them whatever color you want. But I have that same apple green, and I have a color called Christmas green. It's a little bit darker. And I'm tearing these into different strips, maybe between 4, 6, 7, 8 inches, and rolling them all the way from end to end, just like we've been doing. And I'm going to make this into another marquee again that is pinching both sides. So there's one side, there's the other side. Glue that down. Get it all nice and secure. Doesn't need to be perfect. Doesn't need to be completely even for this part. But we're going to turn all of these strips into that same shape. And then we're going to start making our leaves. So here is my last one. And each leaf, you can have some that are just single marquees if you just want really tiny leaves. But some of my leaves are going to be 3 of these together. Some of them are going to be 5 of these shapes together. Here's one more that's a little bit bigger. And there's one side. There's the other. It doesn't matter if you glue it and then pinch it or pinch it and then glue it. That's completely up to you. But now we can start putting some of these together into making those bigger leaves. And however you choose to do this is fine. I like to do it kind of a variety of ways. There's no pattern. I didn't want them all matchy-matchy. But I do take one of my smaller pieces, put a little bit of glue on the bottom half of one side, and then stick one of my larger marquee on. I'm going to do that same thing to the other side, but now I'm going to be gluing one to both the pieces that I just made. So if you can see there, all 3 are touching at this point. Now I can stop there and that one can be made of just 3 pieces, or I can add a little bit on to make it a little bit bigger. So we're going to do the same thing. Put some glue on the bottom half of one side and get that to stay. And don't be afraid to really pinch these on there. I am really pinching. For the sake of time, I'm pinching a little bit more than I was when I made the rest of the examples for these. You can just hold them to dry and not pinch as hard as I'm doing here. It will look great either way. I'll show you the difference in a moment when I pull out the rest of my leaves here. But there's my little 5th piece on the other side. And now everything is just sort of shingled on. Wipe off any extra glue bits that come out. There you go. So there's a little multicolored leaf. Here is some more I made. You can see that the center eye is a little bit more pronounced on these ones because I didn't pinch them as much as I was making them because I wasn't rushing and trying to cram a 30-step video into 30 minutes. So either way will be absolutely fine. Now here is what I think is my favorite part of this entire project, and that is making the branch for our flowers to hang from. So again, just like before, I'm making double thick strips Again, this one is a thicker strip. This is not 2 millimeters. This is 1/8 inch, or 3 millimeters is the closest, so a little bit wider. More of a traditional size that you'll see. Bear in mind, you can make this entire project with 1/8 inch strips, 3 millimeter strips. That'll be fine. Your flowers just might be a little bit bulkier because when we put them together, we're going to kind of stack some pieces. So, you know, whatever you have on hand is fine. Either one will work. I really like the thicker strips just for these branch pieces, just because it has a little bit more substance when you're putting it together. So I have 2 of these strips. They're about 18 inches long before folded. So these are about 9 inches after they're folded. And I'm going to start by tearing what I want the length of my branch to be. That's my longest strip. It's about maybe a little over 4 inches. And then I'm going to take another of the dried double thick strip that's a little bit shorter. You can see there, it's not as long. And I'm going to stack this one on top of the longest strip. I don't want it to start all the way on the end. I want it to be a little bit after that. Oops. And with a little bit of glue, about that much. That's about how long this piece is. They're a little tricky to get off the table once they're flat. And then I'm just stacking it on. Again, I don't want it all the way to the end. And I don't want it all the way to the other end. But what I'm doing is kind of building some bulk here to make this branch look a little bit more three-dimensional than just one skinny little strip going down. So it doesn't look like much yet, but we're going to keep doing what we did. So now I'm going to add a third strip, again, slightly shorter than the last strip I put on. I'll just kind of eyeball that there. That'll be fine. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to glue that on, starting a little bit shorter than the one end. And because it's already shorter, it's not going to hit all the way on the other side. So there we go. There is one side of my branch. What I'm going to do though is flip this whole little chunk over and do the same thing on the other side. I don't need it to be exactly a mirror of the first side, so I'm not worried about these strips being the same size. It would be better if they weren't. So let's make this one maybe a little bit longer than how I started off. So flip that over. Same thing. I don't want it to be exactly the same as the first side, so I think I'll start this one a little bit closer to the edge, but still not exact. And then it was already going to be a little bit longer, so it is hitting closer to that far side. Make sure everything's drying evenly. And at this point, we're getting somewhere. We've got a little bit of a thick branch here. So I want to do one more. We'll make this one really short, just for a lot of variation. And there we go. So the reason I didn't have them all starting exactly the same edge on the first side is because I don't want this to look like a cut branch. I want it to look sort of natural, like it sort of broke it off. And then it's going to naturally taper down as it gets to the end of the branch, because that's how branches are. They start off thick, they end up skinny. So here we are. Doesn't look like a whole lot yet, but pretend this is dried for a little bit. You're going to start kind of manipulating your branch so it's got some ups and some downs and some bends to it, and then ending up on the very skinny edge. Here we go. Like it's already starting to look like a branch. And just keep moving it however you decide you want your branch to look. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. Here's another one that has completely dried. There we go. You can still, even once it's dry, if you want to, move it around a little bit. And then what I would do to really drive home the idea that this is a branch is to get some really skinny little bits, curve them a little bit, And at some places where your branch is bending, kind of have them coming off just like little sticks coming off your branch in a couple spots. You don't have to overdo it. There's already a lot of moving pieces to this project, but already right there, like between you and me, that is a branch. I think that looks great. I'm really proud of that part. So we're gonna let all of these pieces dry. And finally, 20 minutes in, we can start putting together all of our pieces. So for this, I'm mostly going to be using some tacky glue, but I do have my Elmer's glue all as well. I have my workboard here just to keep everything nice and together. Grab your tweezers if you need to, because some of these pieces are quite small and get a little tricky to hold. So the first thing I'm doing is just gluing together the two flat purple petals, just side by side at a slight angle. And then I'm going to put some glue on the underside of the more molded petal and place that on top of those two in the center. Oops. There we go. So right about there. It's okay that it's a little bit taller then. That is probably for the best. Now we're going to start putting on our little sepals, and we're going to do these in layers. So I have two that are going to be coming from the center right between the two bottom petals. There's a little bit of space between the two peaks of those. I'm going to put them up so they're sort of pointing upwards at an angle again between those two. And I'm also grabbing my little small teardrop that I made from the 4-inch paper. I'm going to put that right between those two. Let that dry for a few moments, and then we're going to put on our next two sepals. And at this point, you can do these in different ways. You can have them sort of pointing down. You can have all of them sort of pointing up, because as these flowers mature, these are pointing in different places. For mine, in this one, I'm going to have them more pointing down. So kind of on top of the bottom two and on top of the bottom two petals. This is where that sort of 3D project starts coming in, where it's not really a 3D quilling project, but it's just got some layers to it. So they're sort of glued right on the purple petals on the bottom and on the sepals on the bottom as well. And if you need to, grab a tool to get them pressed down. Let that dry for a few minutes, because they're going to be a little bit loosey-goosey for a while. Next thing we're going to do is make our stamen and pistils coming out of the bottom of our petals. This is definitely one of the more unique parts of this flower, is you have these longer than you think they need to be, straight pieces coming out between the petals. So what I like to do is kind of measure what I think the longest one that I want is, and then tear the rest a little bit shorter, or cut them, whatever you need to do. Either way is fine for this part. And we're going to be making 5 of these, because they're going to match those beige little squished pegs that we made before. So kind of vary these in length. They're not going to be all straight across. They're going to be different lengths, but not too far apart from each other. Kind of get them all in the same ballpark. Here we go. So we have the longest one that I started with, and then 4 more of different lengths. And this is where I'm going to start using my tacky glue, because these pieces are so small and so fine. This will make the process go a little bit easier. And I'm just going to dip with my tweezers here. So I'm going to pick up one, try to get it as straight as I can. If it needs to be remolded there, that's fine. A little bit of glue on the end, and it's just going to go right between the first 2 purple petals, because we had a little bit of a space on the bottom where they weren't touching each other. Just a little bit of glue. You don't need a ton for this. And then just get them all spaced out as you like. I would sort of vary the distance between each one. Don't try to have them exactly the same space between each other, because that's going to look a little too cookie cutter. A little bit too much glue. And I think this one can go there in the middle. And at this point, you can let these dry all the way, or you can go ahead and move on to the next part. We're just going to start gluing our little beige pieces right on. And for this, again, I'm just going to dip in some tacky glue. These are very, very small and sometimes like to stick to the glue. So don't be surprised if that happens. Don't be surprised if they sort of just pop right off your tweezers as you're trying to hold them. That happened to me many, many times. It's gonna happen again. There you go. So just do your best. You really need a very, very, very small amount of glue for this part. So don't stress too much about this. It's probably the most frustrating part of this entire project. It's just getting these little guys on there. But even that is not a big deal. So just take your time, a little bit of glue, and pop each of those on. And then we are getting real close to putting our entire project together. Just jumped right ahead to our last little bit here. Get that on there as straight as I can. And now the only other thing we need to add on to this flower is our green oval. So the little connector piece that's going to go between the stem and our flower. There we go. Just get that on there. I wouldn't worry about the stem just yet, because that length of your stem is going to depend on the composition of your project, and you might not know that just yet. So we're going to leave that for a moment until everything dries. So here we are. Everybody's dry. I have a few flowers made. Here is the one that we just finished, all dry and ready to go. And you can see I have another one there where my sepals are all pointed up, like I had talked about when I was putting it together. I have a couple of flower buds. I have my branch. I have a bunch of leaves. And I have that long double thick strip of green that I did off camera. That's going to be what turns into our stems. So now you can just play around with however you want to set this up. So I like to start by putting down my branch first. So the branch is just going to be, you know how I like to do my compositions, they're just sort of just hanging out in the middle of the page here. So I have a piece of matte board here. My project is going to have 2 of the flowers, and then, I don't know, let's try 2 of the flower buds here. Kind of having them, you know, slightly different lengths coming off the branch. I'm not gluing anything to my matte board right this minute. I'm just going to sort of just play around here and start kind of putting on my stems once I think I know where they're going to go, how long they need to be. I'm just curving them around my finger a little bit. That might be a little bit too long, because I like where the flowers are right now. So here's just approximately that long, and then this one would need to be really tiny for the other flower. But there's no right or wrong way to put this together. You're just going to play around a little bit and just do whatever you think is best. There we go. And then we need a couple of stems for our flower buds as well. Sort of eyeball that. Oh, that worked out pretty well for that one. And have this one coming off of that. Oops. Now, because these are not glued down, these are all going to move around a bunch on me, and that's okay. I didn't want to take the time to show me gluing things. You've seen that many, many times. Let's just use the rest of this for that one. Here we go. And then I like to put on some leaves. I like to have one leaf just kind of coming off the edge of my branch, sort of at a slight angle, or even two of those little separate leaves. And then I'm just going to put on the bigger leaves, kind of draped over the branch in some places. Oh, my stems fell down. We're just going to leave them like that for now. We can move on here. Just kind of coming up in some sections, kind of going over the branch in some other sections. Because that branch is made of the thicker paper, it gives a little bit of height when we're sort of draping the leaves on there. Let me show you one that I have all dried and ready to go. And you can see there's some good depth there from the leaves and the branch. I have one of my stems coming from the opposite side of the branch, kind of folding over into the front. And there it is, all framed up. The colors on these are really striking. Again, you don't have to use the two colored leaves if you don't want to. It just adds a little bit more life to the finished work as well. Don't forget to leave any questions you have in the comments, and I'll get back to those as soon as I can. Also, take a look in the description box of the video for links to all the tools and supplies that I used. I am linking to the big box of the complete set of these Julia paper strips, the thinner strips. If you're looking for those, you can buy them individually. I like the full set if you haven't used these before, because you do get all the colors. It's a great, really great bargain as well. You'll also find a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can find a bunch of quilling extras and resources, and also different ways to support the channel, which does help me to make these videos week after week. And it's always truly, truly appreciated and very, very helpful. And lastly, be kind to yourself. Look out for your neighbors. And if you can, like and subscribe so you can be around for my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.